Hello everybody, I'm back with yet another Platinum review video, and this time we're going to be going over, well, quite frankly, one of the best games I've ever played, and if you haven't played it, I would highly recommend it. This is Hollow Knight, and my god, what a fantastic experience this game was. I very much enjoyed it. If you're wondering why the hell I'm holding a physical copy of this game, these were limited edition. I don't think you could get these anymore. I believe I got it off the Fangamer website. They made a physical copy, but they only made so many, and you would have had to order these back when they first came out. So sorry to those of you who want a copy for yourself. Otherwise, you'll probably have to get it digitally. Anyways, enough about that. Let's talk about the Platinum Trophy, or rather, this game's trophy list in general. All in all, Hollow Knight was such a good game, and by extension, it had a very fun trophy list. The trophy list mostly just has you experiencing most of what the game has to offer. There aren't really any BS hard-to-get trophies that are, like, unfair. Now, you could argue the trophy to beat the 5th Pantheon is unfair, but that's a whole nother beast. We're gonna save that for the later portion of the video, because, quite frankly, that's the trophy that we're gonna be talking about the most. But before we get to that, I want to talk about just the trophy list overall and everything that went into it. Most of the trophies in this game are fairly straightforward, this being a Metroidvania-type game. Most of the trophies just have you exploring the far reaches of this vast map that we can explore, and it's a bit of a collect-a-thon, you know? They have you getting all the Mask Shard upgrades, all the soul fragments, finding all the grubs for the Grub Father, and basically just upgrading your character, getting stronger, getting more rewards, and ultimately just experiencing most of what the game has to offer. Trophy lists like this I really enjoy. Trophies that aren't really asking too much of the player, other than to simply just enjoy everything that's awesome about this game. And it is a fantastic game, and there is a lot to explore here. Honestly, I found myself mostly just not even worrying all that much about the trophies themselves, because I was just so captivated and immersed in this wonderful video game experience. And thankfully, none of the trophies are missable, so you can just enjoy the game at your own pace. Pace? What the fuck? At your own pace, and just kind of have a bit of a leisurely experience with it. That is until you get to the end game. Now, this game does have some challenging trophies in their own right, like, for example, to finish the Grim Troop questline, and ultimately, by the end of it, fight one of the hardest bosses in the game, Nightmare King Grim. There's completing all 3 rounds of the Colosseum, which will definitely test your combat skills if they haven't been tested already. And I think probably the most pain-in-the-ass trophy pre-post game is probably the Solace Trophy, which requires you to do the side quest of the Grey Mourner. This NPC wants you to take an extremely delicate flower and safely transport it to quite literally the opposite side of the map from where you could find this NPC. And if you get hit once, the flower is destroyed, and you will have to return to the NPC to get a replacement flower if you want to attempt this again. But yeah, you have to get all the way to the other side of the map without getting hit. Oh, and by the way, you can't use any fast travel mechanics or stag stations either. You have to walk the entire way there. Now, this sounds like an extremely daunting task, and depending on how good you are at platforming, this one could definitely cause you some trouble. However, you can take steps to make this trophy easier. For one, how you get to the other side of the map is completely your decision. If there's a pathway that you're extremely comfortable with taking, or particular enemies that you struggle with and you would prefer to avoid them, then feel free to plan your own route as you will it. You can take whichever way you want through Hollow Nest to get to your destination. The choice is yours. So I would highly recommend planning accordingly. It's also worth mentioning that unless you actually sit and rest at a bench, most enemies in the game do not respawn after being killed. So if you really want to go the extra mile, which I highly recommend, take whatever route you've planned for yourself and proceed to kill every single enemy in your path, making sure that they are all dead. If you do this and then Dreamgate back to the NPC without resting on a bench, then your pathway will essentially be clear of most danger, thus making the travel across the map that much safer and difficulty-free. That was the way I did it anyway, and I managed to get it on my second attempt. And of course, there was gathering the 2,400 essence for the Moths questline, which meant that we had to go hunt down and fight the dream versions of bosses, which are much harder versions than their original counterparts. Most of the game is a breeze until you get to these challenges. But all these challenges that I just mentioned don't even hold a candle to the absolute hardest thing to do in this game that this trophy list asks of you. And that's the Pantheon of Hallownest. Now, basically, once you reach the Godhome DLC, which can be accessed in the Royal Waterways via a hidden NPC, you'll reach Godhome. And Godhome is the place where we could find the Pantheons. There are 5 Pantheons in total. And basically, these Pantheons, you could think of them as essentially boss rush modes, where they pit you against all the bosses in the game. Each Pantheon has their own set of bosses, including some new ones that you would have never fought before prior to getting to the Pantheons. The Pantheons introduce brand new bosses that you will have to learn and experience. And each time you complete a Pantheon, you unlock the next one. And then you'll have access to a new set of bosses. Completing the first 4 Pantheons grants you access to the 5th and final Pantheon, which is the Pantheon of Hallownest. And the Pantheon of Hallownest is without a doubt the hardest trophy to get in this game. Now, the Pantheon of Hallownest basically combines the first 4 Pantheons into one, meaning you have to fight 42 bosses in a row without dying. Now, you do get breaks in between, however, they're not checkpoints, so if you do die during any of these 42 boss fights, your ass is getting sent back, and you have to start all the way from the beginning. It's very brutal, it's very unforgiving, and something like this can only be achieved with many, many hours of practice. You will have to fight all of these bosses over and over and over until you got them down to an absolute science. You need to be able to effortlessly breeze through these boss fights. And it's not until then that you will actually be able to overcome this great task. Now, you can go for bindings in the previous Pantheons, which basically have you playing the Pantheons through again, except with a huge handicap or a stipulation. There's a binding that nerfs your soul so that you only can get enough soul to cast one spell or heal once. There's a binding that nerfs your nails damage back to default before you got any nail upgrades. There's a binding that reverts your health upgrades back to default, which means you only get 4 masks, meaning you can only get hit 4 or even potentially 2 times, depending on how much damage the bosses deal. And the 4th and final binding has you playing through the Pantheon without any charms equipped. You could do any of these bindings in any order. You don't have to do all 4 of them at once. You can do 1 binding at a time, and if you do 8 bindings in the first 2 Pantheons, you will unlock Lifeblood. And you should remember Lifeblood from the base game, which is basically giving you more health than your permanent health allows you to have. And the Lifeblood can come in real handy if you actually go out of your way to unlock it. So it does somewhat alleviate the overall difficulty of the final Pantheon. So it might be a worthwhile investment to go get them. Personally, I would say at least do 8 bindings to get 3 Lifeblood, because when you do the next 4 bindings, you only get 1 extra Lifeblood, and then when you do the last 4 bindings, you get 1 more Lifeblood. But for the first 8, you get 3, which is a huge value, bang for your buck. You don't really have to bother with the last 2 Lifeblood. I know I didn't. I was able to do the 5th Pantheon without them. But having those initial 3 certainly did allow for more room for error, which basically means you can make more mistakes and still get away with it. So that's definitely something valuable when challenging this daunting task. It's also worth noting that Zout, which is one of, if not considered, the hardest boss in the entire game because of how absolutely bullshit he can be. And honestly, you're only going to understand what I mean by that if you've actually fought him. Funny enough, this boss can actually be exempt from the 5th Pantheon. It turns out, if you don't fight his dream boss on your file, which can be accessed in the basement of one of the houses in Dirtmouth, he basically won't be in the Pantheon if you never encountered him, and thus you can make the Pantheon 1 boss shorter. And like I said, he is one of the hardest bosses in the game, so it might be worthwhile to do that if you're trying to complete the 5th Pantheon for yourself. So I thought that was a pretty neat and cool trick, although me personally, I didn't know that. I was just playing a casual playthrough until I got to the post-game content. It wasn't until then that I was actually looking things up and seeing what was actually required of me. And then I found out the hard way that I was going to have to deal with Zout in the 5th Pantheon no matter what, because I had already fought him in Dirtmouth. And so I was stuck with that shitty situation, but I still did it. I beat the 5th Pantheon, even despite the fact that Zout was there. But just know, if you guys are planning on attempting the Platinum for yourself, that may be an issue that you might have to confront. Besides that, my overall opinion on the Pantheon of Hallownest is that it doesn't actually get hard until you reach the final stretch of bosses. Once you reach the second last bench, you will be faced with the bosses Soul Tyrant, Markoth, Zout, Failed Champion, and Nightmare King Grim. These are some of the hardest bosses in the game that you have to beat consecutively, and they're all right next to each other, so once you get towards the final stretch of the Pantheon, you really start feeling the difficulty ramp up. Now, the basic rule of thumb in this entire game is that you put in enough hours, you sink in enough time and practice, and anything is possible. But because you're fighting 42 bosses in a row consecutively without stopping, what ends up happening is your nerves get shot. You start really feeling every mistake you make, and you start dwelling on them. They can easily tilt you if you're not mentally prepared, and you could just get a nervous case of the jitters and start making stupid mistakes. Your mental game needs to be at its absolute peak performance, because trust me, once you reach the Pure Vessel, which is the second last boss, as well as one of the hardest bosses in the game, immediately following Pure Vessel is the Absolute Radiance. This is also one of the hardest bosses in the game, by far, without a doubt. And the absolutely awful thing about this boss fight is that you have to reach the Absolute Radiance, you have to get all the way to the final boss of the 5th Pantheon, just to be able to practice the boss. The reason for this is because you won't have access to fighting this boss in the hallway that has all the boss statues that you could fight at any time, whenever you want. You will only see statues for bosses you've actually encountered, and that's what causes them to show up in that hallway. But because you only fight the regular Radiance during one of the game's endings, we can't actually practice the Absolute Radiance because it is a much harder version of this boss fight, and it can only be accessed at the very end of the 5th Pantheon. So chances are you're going to get to Absolute Radiance, have no idea what to expect or how to fight her, and you're probably going to lose on your first attempt, which totally sucks, because it means the previous 41 bosses you just fought was practically a waste of time, and you have to do it all over again just to get another good crack at the Absolute Radiance. It's a really shitty and scummy way to design it. Personally, I don't agree with it. I tried to combat this by studying the Absolute Radiance's boss fight as much as I could via YouTube videos before I actually attempted a real run. And by the time I got to her, I totally knew what to expect because I had really done my homework. Despite that, I still lost on my first attempt, but I came really fucking close. I got to her final phase before she ended up killing me. And by that point, my nerves were shot. But on the upside, if you do manage to make it to her, even if you lose, at least you unlock the option to practice the boss fight as many times as you want. And once you get her down, you could tackle the entire Pantheon again, and hopefully the next time, end up completing it. Now, it goes without saying, this is a huge ask, easily one of the most challenging things to do in this entire game, let alone in video games, period. And to those of you who really love Hollow Knight but are not willing to put in the time and effort to actually platinum it legitimately, there is a game-breaking glitch called the Invincibility glitch that you can perform. It's actually quite simple, it's not that hard to do, and it allows you to be completely invulnerable to damage. Hell, even map hazards like spikes or pitfalls can't damage you, completely removing any and all difficulty that comes with the challenge of the Pantheon of Hallownest. So if you want to be an absolute little bitch boy, you could use that glitch and get yourself an easy platinum. and I guarantee that most people who have the platinum in this game did it that way. And hey, honestly, I can't blame you. It's tempting as fuck knowing that glitch exists. That glitch might as well be an alluring mistress of tantalizing beauty and voluptuous figure, because most people and their mothers are going to use that glitch, without a doubt. But I am proud to say that I completed the 5th Pantheon with Zout when I didn't have to have him there, completely legitimately and fairly. I did not cheat, I did not use a glitch. In fact, I live streamed the entire thing, so I have the proof on camera. And it is one of my most proud, crowning achievements that I've ever done in a video game. And I couldn't be happier that all my time spent, all that practice, work, and effort paid off. Was it worth it? I mean, hell yeah! I've never felt better at video games than I do in the present day. Lately, I've been wanting to tackle more challenging projects in video games because it's just so satisfying and fulfilling to me. I absolutely love overcoming great challenges, putting in the effort, and coming out on top. It is one of the best feelings that a gamer can feel, in my opinion, if that sort of thing matters to you. I know it does to me. I've been competitive my entire life. So I honestly couldn't be happier. But overall, I think this game has a very tough trophy list to get the platinum in, if you're not cheating. But if you do cheat, obviously this is a very easy platinum. Either way, no matter how you want to get the platinum, Hollow Knight remains one of the greatest video games I have ever played, and anyone and everyone should play this game if they haven't already. I'm pretty sure most people wouldn't regret it. So I guess with that, I would say I highly recommend Hollow Knight in general, let alone trophy hunting in it. And I guess the last thing I should say, I didn't really talk about the journal entries for the Hunter's Journal, because you do have to get all of the journal entries in the game. I would only recommend doing this after you get the Dream Gate and you have all the different stag stations, so you could go anywhere you want in the game very easily. Because it is a bit of a pain in the ass to hunt down every monster that you need in order to platinum, and not only that, but to kill them over and over repeatedly until you get their journal entries. This will take a while, but on the upside, no enemy in the game is missable. I originally thought that some of the enemies in the game were missable, and if you progressed too far into the game that you could potentially miss them forever, thus locking you out of getting the trophy. But luckily, every enemy can still be accessed, even in the post-game. Sometimes they'll be spawning in different areas that they weren't before, but you could still find them. You'll just have to look it up. And even the White Palace, where they had the huge platforming section to get to the king. You can even revisit that area as well, because that area does have some enemies for the journal. However, I still don't know exactly which enemies are required for the trophy itself, because you don't need every enemy in the game. I'm pretty sure basically every enemy that comes from DLC, like, for example, all the enemies that are introduced from the Grim Troop, don't count towards the Hunter's Journal and getting the Hunter's Mark. So that's something you'll have to look up too, but I can promise you that the game has no missable enemies. So fear not, you can always get the one you missed, if you did miss one. Anyways guys, that's every trophy worth discussing on this trophy list. And like I said, fantastic game, fantastic trophy list by extension. Thank you guys so much for watching. I truly hope you guys enjoyed this review. And if you did, please don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course hit that notification bell to support me. I'd really appreciate it. For more reviews, more trophy hunting guides, as well as trophy hunting content in general, my channel is a plethora of content, if that's the sort of thing that you're interested in. So don't forget to check that out. And with that, take it easy, have a good one everybody, and I will definitely see you in the next one.